Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our Thursday morning class. Now, our Thursday morning class lost its title because, thank God, Baruch Hashem, we concluded the book of the Gate of Trust, and previously, the Unlocking the Siddur, and we start our next series. And I know some of you gave suggestions, talk about happiness, and there were other great suggestions. The one that we're gonna go with, which a few of you requested, was the class on the Tanya, which is a favorite. It's a life-changing, it's a life-altering study to study about Tanya, and it's like a guide to our life. We live differently through the study of Tanya. So that's going to be starting, God willing, next week. So next week, Thursday, I hope to be able to start the new series. We'll see how long it takes. There's 53 chapters, so perhaps a chapter a week. We'll see how we'll structure the class. So stay tuned. Next week, if you want to let your friends know, it's a new series, it's a new beginning. So next week we'll start the Tanya class on Thursday morning. But today, perhaps you're like me. My mind is still very much thinking about Israel, following the developments, following the news. And that's all I'm thinking about. And I think it's on many people's minds, as it should be. So I wanted to share a thought. About Israel, about the land of Israel, and about our connection as Jewish people to Israel. From a young age, many of us have grown to know that part of our Jewish identity is our connection to the land of Israel. Whether we took trips there as children, as young adults, every synagogue is taking trips. There's always trips to Israel. We feel very much connected to Israel. We're sending money to Israel. Israel. What is it really all about? Why is it so important that Lynn living in New Orleans and Susan living in Philadelphia have to have a connection to the land of Israel? I don't want to go to Israel. I'm happy with the way I'm happy living over here, and I don't need to speak Hebrew. I don't need to eat the Israeli food. I don't need the culture of Israel. What is it about Israel, the land of Israel, that is so important to us? And it is true, it is important to us. It is so important that right at the beginning of the Torah, I mean, the first verse of the Torah, right? And we know that as an author, if you're writing a book, if you're writing an article, the first few words, the first chapter, a lot of thought goes into it. You want to start on the right foot. You want to captivate. You want to start with what's most important. How do we begin the Torah? The first words of the Torah, we all know it. Bereshis bara Elokim, in the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. And right away, the leading commentary on the Torah, Rashi, he comments right away in the name of Rabbi Yitzchak, perhaps his father. Why does the Torah begin with the words Bereshis bara Elokim? In the beginning, God created. Why is this the opening of the Torah? Now, what should the opening be with? Right? It's the beginning of history, beginning of creation. So he says, wait, the Torah is a book of laws. The Torah is a book of mitzvos, how to live our life. It's a guide. It's a guide to life. So seemingly, it should start with the first mitzvah of the Torah. Why does it start with almost like a history of creation? And Rashi says something so powerful. He says, it's not just a history lesson. It's not just to know that God created the world and how it happened in 6 days and they rested on the seventh. It's not just information.
How shall we lead?
It's truthfully a life lesson. And he right away over here, he connects this to Israel. How does Israel fly in over here? What's the connection? Right away, Rashi says, Do you know why God begins the Torah with the creation of the world? Because it's a message. It's a message to the Jewish people, and it's a message to the world. That God created the world. He's in charge. He also created Israel, the land of Israel. He is the one who gave Israel to the Jewish people, right? We know he promised it to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. He, at one point, took it away from them. So the same way he took it away from them, he will give it back to them. So Israel is our homeland because the world is God, created by God, and God gave it to us. And that is why the Torah begins with Bereshis. In the beginning, God created heaven and earth. I mean, fascinating, but seemingly out of left field. Like, Israel is obviously so essential to Judaism that the Torah begins with the creation of the world. Why? Tells us Rashi. Because it's a message that Israel belongs to the Jewish people. So what is it about Israel? What is it about our connection to Israel? That's so important. So let's take a step back for a moment and let's look at the history of the Jewish people and the land of Israel. In these weeks, when we study the weekly Parsha, so we mentioned already in the end of this week's Parsha, the Parsha of Noah, the second Parsha, that Abraham and his family, his father Terach, living in Mesopotamia at the time, right? Modern day Iraq, roughly, they start to journey. And they start to go west towards Israel. They don't make it to Israel. They stop in a place called Haran. And that's where they settle. And in next week's Parsha, God speaks to Abraham for the first time and tells Abraham, leave your father's home. Leave your birthplace. Leave your comfort zone and go to the land that I will show you, which is a reference to the land of Israel. I mean, this is before we were a nation. It was just a land. It was a piece of land. People lived there. It was civilized. It was settled. How was it different? What was unique about this land? And so some of the commentators already mentioned over here that everyone knew that even then, that the land of Israel was a special land. If someone needed extra blessings in their life, they would travel to Israel. In fact, the fact that Abraham and Sarah, they were childless, and they wanted a child, they wanted this extra miracle of having a child, they knew you could travel to Israel, perhaps that's where it will come to fruition. So there was already talk back in the day that the land, living in this space, living on this geographic location of Israel, that itself was something special. Abraham is there. That's where Isaac is born. The famous binding of Isaac happens obviously in Jerusalem, in Israel. Jacob is born in Israel. Jacob leaves briefly for a number of years as he's running away from his brother Esau. His father Isaac remains in Israel. He returns to Israel with his children, and eventually he leaves Israel when there's the famine and Joseph is in Egypt, and he reunites with Egypt with Joseph in Egypt. So from when Abraham goes to Israel, Abraham leaves briefly as well to Egypt, but Jewish people, the Jewish people are in Israel until Jacob leaves, goes to Egypt. The Jewish people are in Egypt for 210 years. They leave Egypt, they're in the desert for 40 years. So 250 years after Jacob leaves the land of Israel, the Jewish people return to the land of Israel with Joshua, and they inherit the land. They settle the land. Now, from then until today, there has always been a Jewish presence in Israel. Perhaps there was maybe 70 years that there was no presence of Jewish people. Joshua comes in, they settle the land. There's King Saul, there's King David. They have discovered today artifacts, coins from the time of King David. You have King Solomon. They built the first temple in Jerusalem, where also they have found artifacts from the first temple in Jerusalem. In fact, I was with Diane in Israel, and we went to the Jerusalem, the Western Wall tunnels, and you actually walk on a path on a cobblestone from the first temple era. And again, there are many coins that they have found from this era. Jewish people are there with the first temple that stands in Jerusalem on Temple Mount for 410 years. Then they are exiled. The temple is destroyed. A lot of idol worship. The temple is destroyed. The Jewish people are expelled from the land of Israel for 70 years. And that's where the story of Purim takes place, in Persia. But 70 years later, led by some of our greatest prophets like Ezra and Nehemiah and others, Jewish people returned to the land of Israel. Not all of them. Many Jews stayed behind, but thousands of Jews returned to the land of Israel. They build what's called the second temple in Jerusalem, which stands for 420 years, in the same spot on the Temple Mount. At one point, it is partially destroyed and it is rebuilt by Herod. It's the most magnificent building, magnificent structure in the whole world. They say that whoever hasn't seen the structure of Herod, the second temple, has never seen a beautiful structure, beautiful building. It's built for it lasts for 420 years, and eventually, roughly in the year 67 or 69 of the Common Era, it is destroyed by the Babylonians. I'm sorry, it's destroyed by the Romans. The Babylonians destroyed the first temple. The Romans, who occupied Israel roughly about 100 years beforehand, they finally destroyed. They conquered. Well, they destroyed the temple, and they expelled many of the Jews from Jerusalem and from Israel. However, Jewish people remain in Israel. In the Galilee and in other cities, there is always a Jewish presence. And throughout the next few hundred years, there are known yeshivas in Israel. There's the Jerusalem Talmud that was written in Jerusalem, in Israel. There are Jewish people living, pockets of Jewish people throughout the Middle Ages. Historians debate whether they were a minority, or perhaps they were even more than that, the majority of people living there. But there were definitely people living there. There are people who wrote responses, rabbis who wrote responses from Israel. We know names, we know places of Jewish people who lived in Israel throughout these ages. And in the 1100, and the 1200, 1300, 1400, after the Spanish expulsion from Spain, many Jews traveled to Israel. During all of the issues in Europe, communism, Jewish people go to Israel. And of course, in more contemporary times, we know that after, 1920s and 1930s, 1940s, of course, many thousands of Jews, today millions of Jews living in Israel. So the Jewish people, from a historical standpoint, have always been in Israel. Perhaps for 250 years, Jacob leaves Israel and the Jewish people return with Joshua. And then after the expulsion from Israel, after the destruction of the first temple, Jewish people are not there for 70 years. But other than that, the Jewish people have always been in Israel. And the question is, what is so unique about Israel? What is so special about the land of Israel? Why does the Torah begin with this message to us about our connection to the land of Israel? So I want to just give one thought. One thought. And I want to open a map for you over here. Let me see if I can share my screen. And this is Google Maps, simple as that. And this is what Google Maps tells us is the region of Israel, right? We see over here, Israel, Jerusalem, right in the center. I'm going to zoom out for a moment. Zoom out for a moment, right? In ancient times, this was the world as we knew it, right? There was the Middle East. You have North Africa. You have the Middle East. You have Asia to the right. You have Europe, Western Europe, Russia, Ukraine, right? Surrounding Israel. There's a lot of travel, a lot of business going on, commerce going through. There are some wars. Empires, nations are fighting with each other. So if you had to choose a sliver of land, a piece of land that is the most it's the most important piece of land from a strategic standpoint, which piece of land would you choose? Would you choose Belgium and France? Would you choose Morocco or Algeria or Spain? Would you choose Iran or Iraq or Georgia or Uzbekistan or Oman or Egypt, Sudan? What would you choose? So historians point to the land of Israel, right at the center. Because if I want to get from anywhere in Europe to Northern Africa, where do I got to go? I got to go through Israel. If I got to get from anywhere of Northern Africa to the Middle East, where do I got to go? I got to go through Israel. If I want to get anywhere from Asia to southern countries of Europe, where do I got to go? Got to go through Israel. So Israel was always a place where everyone wanted a small sliver of land. Everyone wanted because it was a center point. It was a hub. If I was if I was choosing where a hub for my airline should be, the most central place would be Israel. So it was a place of great influence and as a great strategic standpoint. So Israel was at the center of everything. But there's more to that, to Israel. Because if we zoom in for a moment to the land of Israel, Israel, as is much of the Middle East and Northern Africa, doesn't, it's a place where it often does not rain. Months and months go by without any rain in Israel. Now, there are some countries in the regions that are not agricultural countries. But any country that has agriculture knows the importance of a water source of water, rain. Cairo, Egypt, has the Nile River. If you go a little bit to the east, Iraq, Jordan, Syria, obviously ancient Babylon, Mesopotamia, they have numerous, the Euphrates and others, other rivers flowing through. But Israel does not have a source of water, and it's very high in agriculture. So Israel, even though it's a very strategic standpoint, it's a great place to have, great piece of real estate, but it's also the most difficult because there's no rivers going through. And how are you going to plant? It's very difficult. And perhaps that is exactly the reason why God gave us the land of Israel. Because if you're a farmer in Israel, you know one thing that you really need? You need to have a lot of trust in God. Because there's no two ways about it. You can have all the sophistications. But one thing you can't control, the weather. We all know that. Even today, Israel's saying that. I hope it's not true. That one of the delays in the ground operation was the weather. Weather wasn't right? We can't control the weather. So when we don't have to rely on water, on rain, we have our own water sources. We don't have to think about God. We are fully in control. Koichi v'oitzem yadi, as the verse states. It's my own power. It's my own might. It's my own sophistication. It's my own talents that bring about the result, the success. But in Israel, we couldn't say that because every farmer knew that we do what we have to do, but ultimately we got to sit there and pray to God, please bring rain. There's a whole tractate in the Talmud, I haven't said the Talmud right behind me, a whole tractate, the tractate of fasting, because it was a common occurrence in Israel where they had to fast and beseech God that there should be rain because they were not in control of that. You know what? In Egypt, they didn't need that. In Egypt, they had that security. We have the Nile River. We have what we need. And that was, the fact that there was a famine in Egypt, that was something that's why it was news, because Egypt never has famines, because they have the Nile River. And that's why Egypt in Hebrew is Mitzrayim. Mitzrayim means boundaries. It is physically surrounded by water, as New Orleans is, but also the boundaries in our head, because we never go out of the box, because we feel very secure that we're fully in control. There's nothing greater than myself because I'm in control of my destiny. But in Israel, we always recognize that we need a higher power. We need to turn to God because we don't have a way. We can't say it's all us. We are in control. It's all our might. And that is why God gave us the land of Israel. And that is why the Torah begins with creation and with a message to the Jewish people that this is your land, because this is a message in how we view life and how we view God. Remember, it's not about you. The first message, a guide to life, is there is a greater power. Turn to God. You do your part. Make it for yourself, like we say, a vessel to receive God's blessing. But ultimately, it's God's blessings that brings about the success. That's the message of Israel. And that's a message that Israel has to be, as we say, a light unto the nations, to spread that forth through all of the commerce. All of the people who are coming through Israel have to learn this message from the Jewish people. The message is, you do your part. God wants us to use our talents and our qualities. But ultimately, remember that first of all, that our talents are God-given, but the blessing, the success comes from God. That's the message of Israel. And that's a message that even if you don't live in the land of Israel, we feel that connection to the land of Israel. What do we feel connected to? Yes, to the physical, geographical piece of real estate of Israel, but the message of Israel is what we connect to as well. The message of bitachon, the message of trust in God, that God is the one who provides. That's the message of Israel, and that's the message that we have to live with wherever we are. And that is also true with what's going on now in Israel, where we think, what can we do with all the atrocities in Israel and the lack of security simply that happened in Israel? And we have to fight, and we have to do our part. And we have to also understand that being Israel, ultimately everything happens through God, and we need God's blessings. So in addition to having a strong army and a sophisticated army and doing all the trainings that we need and doing that part to the fullest, ultimately we have to realize that the success of any army is only with the blessing of God. And therefore, what can we do for Israel? Yes, we can send funds, we can send supplies, but we can also do a mitzvah. Because when we do a mitzvah, we are solidifying this idea that we believe that ultimately it's God's blessings that come through our soldiers. So connecting to God and deepening this relationship with God, strengthening our bitachon in God, ultimately helps as well, or perhaps helps just as much. So that's the message of our connection to Israel, and what we could do because of that connection to take the message of Israel and live by it. And I want to conclude with showing a little video. And again, I'm mentioning Diane again because Diane was on our trip to Israel. This is a video that I took just a few months ago in March when we took the trip to Israel. In this trip, one of my highlights was going down to the Gaza border. We went to visit a town, a kibbutz. It's called Kibbutz Alumim, down right near Gaza. I mean, when we heard the news last week, the first thing that came to mind was, what's with the Kibbutz Alumim? Only because I spent the day over there. I met the little children. I met the families, and we had such a beautiful time over there. Such an uplifting experience to see the families, to talk to the people there. And we took a little drive around, to see just to see what's going on over there. So very much connected. And looking at the map, we heard places like Be'eri and Re'im, Nahal Oz, Kfar Az. I mean, these are on the map. These are right near each other. Talking about New Orleans and Medellin, we're talking about a mile apart from each other, maybe 2 miles apart from each other. It's right there. So I was extremely nervous to find out what happened. And thank God, Baruch Hashem, with all the devastation and pain that we endured in the other kibbutzim in the neighborhood, Alumim, actually, they had their security team, locals. When they heard the shootings, they were able to fight off the terrorists. I mean, I think I heard about 35, maybe more, tried to get in, and they were, thank God, unsuccessful. So the people in this video that you'll see now, to my understanding, are, thank God, all with us. I'm sure they're very hurt and emotionally and mentally, but I believe everyone in that town was spared. But I want to just show you this video momentarily. Here we go. Where is it? Give me 1 second. Here it is.
אני פה בקיבוץ אלומים, כל הילדים החמודים מהקיבוץ. אלומים, מה השם? אלומים, כן. אז מה אתם אומרים למטיילים מאמריקה? מה אתם אומרים? רוצים להגיד להם? שלום! שלום! לשמוע אולי שיר אחד. לדיון יצאנו, כללית מצאנו, על גבעת הדשא במאגם, אלא ראינו, אלא ראינו, ומשם ערכנו Toda Rabba. That is amazing to see these little kinderlach, these little children who are living here in the Kibbutz Alumim, one of the only religious kibbutzim right on the Gaza border. We had a fascinating tour of the kibbutz.
That was in March, and I mean, just watching this video, I was looking at it last night. Thank God, Baruch Hashem, they were spared. But to think of what would happen in neighboring kibbutzim, children just like that, beautiful, beautiful neshamas, and I'm sure these children as well. I'm sure they knew their friends, and also even just kind of the horror that they had to endure. So our prayers are with them. We add in doing a special mitzvah, whether it is putting on tefillin if we don't do it regularly, if we don't light Shabbat candles regularly, it's a good time to dust off those candlesticks. If we don't have a mezuzah on our door, perhaps we have a mezuzah on our front door. We don't have mezuzahs on our other doors in our house. We want to add a mezuzah or two. This is a beautiful, beautiful time to add in the mitzvah, add in our connection with God, say a prayer, do some Torah study, something, obviously helping another person, something that we can do and say, this is done in memory of those who have lost their life. And this is done to help in honor of those who are suffering, those who are physically suffering, people who are injured, for those who are emotionally suffering, which is obviously many, many people now, especially in the people who live in southern Israel. And obviously for our soldiers who are on the front line, they should be safe and secure and able to protect us and do their job successfully. So I'll leave you with that. Thank you for joining us this morning. And as I mentioned previously, next week, Thursday, we should be able to start our new series of Thursday morning, Tanya and You. So we'll see you then. Thank you for joining
Rabbi. Great class. You can do Psalm 20 is a very good one. All the Psalms.
Absolutely. Say a Psalm or two, Psalm 20, Psalm 121, or any Psalm. I mean, any Psalm.
Doesn't
but
matter.
yeah, it is traditional to say Psalm 20 and Psalm 121. Thank you for that. Yes, Dina.
And light any candle every day just to bring light in. Thank you. Bye, everyone.